Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Again, if you've come to digital transformation with the Internet of Things, you're in the right place. It's a webinar that is put on by Optimity Advisors, and will be, I know the original time was an hour if you're on the East Coast from noon to 1 p.m. However, we're going to try to limit this the presentation piece of this to 45 minutes so that we can allow for plenty of questions afterwards. And over those 45 minutes, after some introductions, we will hit these basic points around what IoT is, why is it important, why is it, as you'll probably see, critical to the digital economy. Give you some examples, some you may have heard of, some you may not. So that is our aim there, is to cover some of these examples that may be a little more hidden or not easy to see, and then talk a bit to implementing IoT in your business, and then, as we said, save some time at the end for Q&A. So real quick, just some introductions. My name is Scott Alexander. I'm a managing director with Optimity Advisors. Have been in primarily or most recently in the healthcare field for a number of years, doing consulting, and have also worked in consumer goods, both manufacturing, distribution, and retail ends, as well as industrial products. So those areas and those industry sectors actually will be touched on here in this presentation. And with me is Karin Roof, who is a manager with Optimity. Karin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, welcome everyone. I'm Karin Roof, and I'm a manager in the Minneapolis office. I bring 20 years of management consulting experience and innovation to our team, and primarily in healthcare and financial services. And we're looking forward to sharing this webinar on digital transformation with IoT with you. Thanks for joining.
And before we kick in, we also have our facilitator, Ryan Murphy. So if you hear a voice that's neither Karin's nor mine, it's Ryan who will be helping us with some of the polls and Q&A that will be coming up. So just a quick 30-second commercial on Optimity. We are an organization born in 2009, so it's our 10th year, but a digital consultancy primarily centered on what we call people-centered strategies. So helping those who use technology, especially in this absolute plethora of digital technology explosion, just navigate and find their opportunities with this ever-growing piece of really our world in general. Technology is growing by leaps and bounds and becoming more and more a part of just day-to-day life. So that is our vision and our mission. We do it in two ways. One is by helping our clients and individuals do what we call strengthen today. So paying attention to the imperatives that are guiding your business day to day, quarter to quarter, within a year or so, that are really on your books to be budgeted for projects where you are implementing something. The flip side of that is the create tomorrow piece, and that is, how do you look at your business in 5 to 10 years? What does it need to look like? And importantly, how do you either disrupt or keep from being disrupted in that business? So that we focus on those two sides of the coin, and then how we can get them to intersect. Typically, as we work with our clients, this manifests itself in three primary areas where we have a good amount of focus and experience. One is that all of us are familiar with just in our daily lives, and as it intersects with IoT, is the customer experience, whether it's healthcare, retail, financial services, whatever. Almost all of us have a greater to lesser degree of customer experience with some element of technology. The process optimization, so the inner workings. How do certain businesses that we buy consumer goods and services from, how do they get those to us better, faster, and cheaper, and reach out to us to inform us on new goods and services? And underlying that, how do you leverage the sea of data that powers both of those processes and the consumer experience as it grows bigger and bigger, and especially now that IoT is in the picture, which we will touch on here in the next 45 minutes. So that brings us to what is IoT? I realize that there are people on this webinar that are very familiar with IoT, some that may not be, so we'll try to keep it at a mid-level. As we walk through these examples of IoT and where it can be applied, please feel free to raise your hands and ask a question, even though we've got a time for Q&A at the end. And you can do that either through the Q&A function as you hover to the bottom of your screen, or the chat function as you also hover there. Either way, feel free to interrupt us and ask questions. This is a very high-level, oversimplified version of what is IoT, and it's really meant to convey that it's all around us and it's growing. It's in industries that we're aware of, some industries that we're not, and some that have really recently started to grow, like smart homes and smart cities. Some like manufacturing that have been with us quite a while. So we'll try to touch on that spectrum as we go forward. But before we do, it's good to know who is in what sector that's listening to us. So we're going to send out a poll on which industry sector do you align with most closely. So as you look at this, you can answer the questions on the bottom, and people can chime in on where you're coming from. And we'll wait for just a minute. No obligation to answer these questions, but it does help us gear the rest of our talk today. So we're seeing mostly healthcare, some manufacturing, which is very helpful. And Ryan, is that what we've got?
Yep, looks like we got mostly healthcare folks on the call, as well as somebody from the manufacturing industry. So thank you all for sharing your answers. I believe we have one more poll coming up towards the end at the webinar as well.
You bet. All right, and that's good to know. So we'll try to talk to this in terms of mostly healthcare and manufacturing, but again, if you have questions on other sectors as we walk through them, feel free to raise your hands. I think everybody here is touching smart home in some way, shape, or form. So that is an industry that we'll touch on. In the IoT ecosystem, we typically think of it in 5 components, and logically starting from the sensors that do something to sense what your world or a world of a machine or process is and is behaving. And that can be anything from the photo switch sensors on a machine tool in a Boeing plant to the Alexa that's sitting on your kitchen counter. This is then typically fed into an ever-growing web of connectivity, probably starting first with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and it gets it to a ever increasing, expanding versions of cloud aggregators, so to speak, that holds this big data and then ideally feeds it to some analytics engines that make sense of it for us, whether it's visualization or more sophisticated algorithms that then feed it to the users, whether those users are us as consumers or B2B, industrial or other users in other industries. But this is a very high level look at how the IoT continuum works. Typical players in this industry you've probably seen before, and some of you may not have. Obviously, the Alexa example with Amazon, Google Home, your phone, even getting to your smart home sensors that may be in your Xfinity home monitoring and security system. Samsung produced or bought and spun off an entire subsidiary called Smart Things that is entirely in the business of creating and connecting IoT devices. Cloud players, you're probably familiar with Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon as being the primary ones, and then the ability to take that information from the cloud and enhance it. There are a number of growing players here, from Google Analytics, which many of you may use in your businesses to track website clicks, to the open source TensorFlow algorithms that they've made public for AI use and NLP use, right down to customized systems, visualization and algorithms that healthcare or industrial users may create, all to transfer the data from the sensors to those that can actually use the data for their business. We'll try to touch on the spectrum from consumer to industrial, and Karin will be giving specific examples of these across smart homes, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, and again, based on your responses, we'll try to focus more on healthcare and manufacturing. The interesting thing here is that, like a lot of other technologies, including the internet, the growth started in government and industrial uses. For example, smart sensors in manufacturing, or dumb sensors at first, but then as the internet came along and each sensor had an IP address, then we found we could connect those. And then, as with a lot of technologies like the internet, it migrated over to consumer use, where it exploded. So that's kind of the trend we're seeing with IoT as well. And that really fueled this stat alone. The size of IoT is pretty impressive. It's estimated to be, depending on what source you look at, over $1 trillion market by 2022. And it really is underscored by these industries, but many more. So discrete and process manufacturing, not surprisingly, based on the point that we just raised before around that's primarily where its origin is, with smart sensors, but then quickly migrating to transportation, utilities, and of course the consumer sector that we just talked about. And the growth there, not surprisingly, if that was where the lion's share of the spending is last year, the growth is primarily in consumer, followed by healthcare, retail, insurance. And you may have seen some of the commercial, the Allstate commercial, where there's smart sensors that sense the degree of damage in a car and use that to submit a claim. That's just one consumer and insurance example of where IoT is starting to weave its way into businesses in our daily lives. I don't know if you follow Peter Diamandis. He is a futurist, but he sums it up pretty well when he says this triple trend that is fueling IoT really can be sunk down to a technology implementation of plummeting size and cost, along with huge increases in performance. So Moore's Law, with those of you that are familiar with that, and the ubiquitousness of it. It's everywhere. So lower size, higher performance, and the spreading of it in almost everywhere we go. So examples of these, and really the pieces of that technology that underlie what Peter just mentioned. There's the empowered edge, which is a fancy way of saying the intelligent devices that we either hold in our hands or that sit on products that we buy in a retail store, or machines in a factory, or products like this drone that you see. So ever intelligent ways that the collector or generator of information is interfacing with us or machines, to the increasing size and variety of the cloud storage and distribution, to what we're calling autonomous things, which take an empowered edge to a new degree. Self-driving cars, or the vision of self-driving cars, is a good example, where not only is the car intelligent enough using both IoT and AI to detect where it is on the road, but ultimately will share information with a network and other autonomous cars to get even smarter. So those are three areas that really we see underscoring and empowering this growth of IoT. Fourth one that many of you are familiar with your cell phones is the growth to 5G, which will provide a roughly 100x improvement over the networks you see today. And that also will manifest itself in these industries that we'll be covering, from smart cities and manufacturing to retail and insurance and healthcare. So where does IoT sit in the larger ecosystem of what we blanket term as the digital ecosystem? All of these elements, this is not an exhaustive list of the ecosystem, but a pretty accurate one from the standpoint of what's out there, either in its infancy or growing, from blockchain to virtual reality to AI and machine learning to robotics. Robotics, for example, is a relatively mature technology, whether you're using Pega or Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere. Those platforms have been out for a while. Blockchain, far less in use with smart contracts. But what we'd like to focus on is its relationship, its yin and yang, so to speak, between IoT and AI and machine learning. If IoT and the many growing devices that we just talked about are the pitchers, AI and machine learning are the catchers. So it's important to be able to have the analytics, as we stated before, that can interpret the plethora of types of data that are streaming in at an ever higher rate, so that the user can make use of them. And we're relying on algorithms, learning algorithms, from deep learning to machine learning, that IoT and machine learning bring to bear, so that not only can we interpret the data, but as the data grows and grows, the actual algorithm gets smarter and smarter. So this is a crucial piece of the ecosystem that would probably warrant a webinar all by itself entirely. So what that really does is, interestingly enough, it provides the next frontier for big data-driven insight, where initially it was powered, if some of you remember far enough back, which I'm dating myself, but far enough back to client-server computing and the growth of ERP systems in businesses where heretofore, before that, computers were were siloed, distributed, and with client server computing and ERP, you could pretty much run the bulk of your transactional businesses on these systems. And that was the first step to pull together what was then known as big data, at least across an enterprise. That grew late 80s, 90s, and then as the internet came into the forefront, the next frontier of big data driven insight was websites, whether they're B2B, B2C. Those became the next tier of collectors of big data and the opportunity to analyze that and make sense of it. Now, the third tier is IoT, that is an even larger expansion of this wave of big data, as there are smart devices everywhere that Karin actually will be walking through a few examples on that will be feeding this wave of big data and the opportunity to analyze it and bring value to those that use it. So as promised, I'm going to hand it over to Karin, and she'll be talking about some of the IoT examples in industries.
Thank you, Scott. As Scott has given us a great foundation for understanding what the Internet of Things really means. You know, it really means having sensors that use the internet to then deliver information to users that can use it in brand new ways. You know, we recognize that IoT solutions are already having a significant impact on our lives, and with innovation, we'll use IoT more and more. You know, as we go through some of these examples, we may see that, oh, we didn't even realize that was an IoT solution. But now that we can take a look at what really is creating these solutions, it's really the Internet of Things that's enabling these. So why don't we go forward and take a look. So we'll go back to the same categories that that Scott covered. You know, there's kind of a spectrum of consumer to industrial, and these are maybe 3 or maybe 5 major categories. There are a lot of subcategories and a lot of focus areas for IoT, but we've chosen to highlight some solutions in these 5 categories: homes, healthcare, cities, retail, and smart manufacturing. And maybe we'll spend a little more time on healthcare and manufacturing, since that's where our audience is from today. So starting with smart homes, you know, the Internet of Things really perhaps got its start in homes with security systems, where wireless sensors monitor and alert police when needed. Then that has evolved into also having temperature and humidity monitoring. If you have a cabin, for example, that you want to make sure doesn't get cold, having an IoT solution at your cabin so that you know that there's an emergency situation to make sure the heat is appropriate, as well as your home where you're living. 3M has recently launched a smart air filter that can identify when you need to change your air filter for clean air in your home. And finally, you know, convenience. The Echo Dots that are ubiquitous now to help us turn on and off the lights, the TV, change the channels, and automatic vacuum cleaners. So clearly, robotic vacuum cleaners that do the job for us. So we all appreciate having solutions like this that make our lives easier. In the future, we're anticipating that for homes, artificial intelligence can be used to track people's location and adjust everything from heating and cooling to music and lighting, and optimize resource usage. Secondly, a real need in society that we see with the aging population is enabling elderly people to live in their homes safely and ensure that they are monitored in a way that people can intervene if needed. But it could provide aid in other ways, such as reminders to take medication, or restocking the fridge. You know, if there is a sensor in a fridge that can identify when the stock is low, and then perhaps even automatically restock the fridge. Those are ways that technology could be used to truly enable someone to live autonomously in their homes, in addition to the emergency services that we have now with some call buttons that people have. And again, increased home monitoring of systems like water, electricity, temperature, humidity can enable homeowners to proactively optimize resources and manage incidents. Moving to healthcare, today, starting with consumer healthcare, we're all aware of personal safety and fitness solutions, starting with, the senior medical alert, help me, I can't get up, with wireless 24/7 monitoring for seniors, but also for folks who are active or just wanting to motivate personal fitness. We have the Apple Watch and Fitbit that can track activity and motivate fitness. I was involved in the beginnings of remote monitoring for the pacemaker patient population with pacemaker devices, but now there are remote monitoring solutions in healthcare that are designed to improve health outcomes with being able to track additional data and then translate that into actionable insight for cardiac, diabetes, asthma, medication adherence, etc. And these solutions alert patients and caregivers when they need to change what they're doing in order to optimize outcomes. So a wonderful step forward with remote monitoring. Also, we're all very aware now too, especially in this time of COVID-19, that the ability to carry out doctor visits online is A, convenient, and B, it increases the capacity of caregivers. So caregivers can be everywhere with a telehealth solution and be available in a lot less time. So this has been a key solution for us in our current times with COVID-19, and I think it'll continue to evolve as people continue to want convenient and inexpensive solutions for healthcare. In the future, as Scott was indicating, artificial intelligence and machine learning truly are the evolution of how we can use sensor data to increase the decision-making capability of the system to make recommendations to users. So for things like diabetes monitoring, where there's a lot of data that a user would have to interpret on their own, if artificial intelligence and machine learning can be more sophisticated to make some first pass analyses of what the user should do about the data, that'll be helpful for the users to use the technology more effectively. So so this example here shows strip charts of data for insulin readings over time for a diabetes patient. Well, if the system can be more directive with that patient using artificial intelligence and machine learning, that will help them stay on top of their healthcare with a lot less complexity. On the right-hand side of the screen, 3M is launching a real-time population management tool that allows providers to stay on top of the performance of their provider network in treating patients for various diseases and understanding where their resources are going and how they compare to benchmark data. So a truly powerful way for providers to really understand what's happening in their network and then act on it. So really incredible new solutions in healthcare. Turning to smart cities, clearly there's some wonderful innovations in transportation and urban mobility. Dallas has a smart traffic control system where traffic sensors inform operations, perhaps how to turn on and off stoplights to optimize traffic flow. We in Minneapolis, just as a different type of example, we have a Nice Ride bicycle rental program where it's an IoT-enabled system where you can rent a bike and you can identify where there are bikes available on your phone. You can ride the bike and you can return it at any station around the Twin Cities. So the app on your phone helps you identify where bikes are, and then it helps you identify where you could return it. So a great program for recreation and making our cities nice places to live. In energy and water management, smart grids are being developed so that supply and demand can be optimized. And longer term, actually implementing real-time data and pricing so that people will choose to use energy when it's at the optimal time for the grid. So this is a very powerful way for cities to be smart with the resources that we have. And a final example for smart cities today, San Francisco actually has smart big belly trash cans where sensors let haulers know when the trash cans are full and know when they need to be emptied. So it doesn't have to be on a clock. You know, if some trash cans never get full or if some trash cans are full every day, you know, they can actually manage the trash pickup when it's needed. In the future, I think McKinsey's done a really wonderful job with a white paper on digital solutions for a more livable future for smart cities. And really it's focused on, you know, how do we have quality of life in cities? And take a look around the wheel for the type of solutions that IoT can enable with safety, optimizing emergency response, time, you know, travel, transit, public transit, traffic management, health, environment, connectedness, jobs, cost of living. So you see that really when we've seen some of the solutions we already have today, we can see that the next step might be for really visionary cities that put resources into developing IoT solutions. Those solutions can have a huge payback in terms of quality of life as well as cost of living and convenience for the citizens that live in the city. Retail. Retail, we're all very familiar with how we've experienced IoT in retail with new customer channels. We all know about Amazon Prime and Prime Video, where before we would have to go to a store to buy something, and now we can have it delivered to our doorstep in hours or days, and we can have entertainment at the snap of a finger or the touch of a clicker. Banking is another example of something that's been around for a long time, where you think about it, it's really an IoT solution that has a sensor, an ATM, where you or a website or a mobile app where you can transmit data around about your money, and then you can also at ATMs get dollars distributed to you. We're also seeing increasing use of IoT to truly transform customer experiences and with products and services. And I think one of the more remarkable examples here is in the insurance industry. You know, State Farm has a safe driver program where you can get a discount based on it monitoring your ability to your performance and not speeding, you know, not braking too fast, etc. And Liberty Mutual is advertising pay as you go. So they will actually have premiums based on the mileage you drive in the car with your car versus a flat rate. So a really great innovation in car insurance. Finally, in retail, what's also really important to recognize is that under the hood, you know, the retailers are getting much smarter with their inventory management. So if you, for example, order something from Macy's and they have that item located in a store in North Carolina, they can find that item. And this is an example of a technology, a sensor technology that enables retailers to have efficient inventory management with location, identity, and authenticity. In the future, you know, clearly for retail, it's always a goal to balance demand and supply. So really having a great handle on inventory management and understanding what's moving and what's sitting, and understanding how to manage the supply chain, shipping and receiving logistics can really help them become even more efficient at bridging that demand and supply equation. Secondly, you know, integrating customer touch points for a seamless customer experience for in-store, online, social media, and public spaces and mobile. You know, clearly when I shop at Macy's, I want them to know who I am wherever I am, online or in the store. If I perceive that, you know, they don't know me in one of those environments, it's kind of a turnoff to have to re-explain who I am to them as a customer. So Predicting customer behavior also, you know, if you see that someone is shopping for something, we've all experienced shopping for something online, and then all of a sudden you see ads for those products on your computer screen for the next 2 weeks. You know, if retailers get smart around how they can actually drive learning, purchase from learning, by perhaps delivering a just-in-time coupon, you know, that will help help them be good servers to their customers. And finally, really enabling some granular customization of size, fit, and color, using perhaps body scanners and past purchase data to help consumers make the shopping process easier. So finally, with smart manufacturing, you know, manufacturing has really been about, you know, optimizing quality, cost, and time. And with manufacturing equipment, we want to ensure that that it has the right maintenance so that we can fix it before it breaks. And also, we want to ensure that we understand where the process is in terms of producing work in progress, and ensure that we have our equipment utilized in a smart way. If there are processes we can automate and understand where we need to put workers, you know, that kind of technology really helps. So machine metrics is an example of a solution for manufacturing operations. Also, Samsara is a fleet tracking technology that also enables folks to understand where their trucks are, monitors energy usage and machine health. And finally, another example here is in the food industry with, why don't we go one more down, Scott? There we go. With the food industry, there are sensors that even track temperature, light, humidity, pressure, and tilt for goods handling, so your bananas arrive at the grocery store in good condition. So in general, manufacturing has really looked at, well, how can we use these sensors to enable predictive maintenance, fixing before it breaks, enabling autonomous operation, it runs on its own, and also a key for manufacturers is supply chain awareness and management, adjusting material supply per plant demand, and tracking how it's being delivered. So in the future for manufacturing, we really see that because predictive maintenance is such a core driver, that making that ubiquitous is in the near future, today and tomorrow, followed by a tighter supply chain ecosystem. So knowing what you need from your suppliers and ordering that with the right lead time to have your system optimized. That's in the near future or further out. And finally, further out is, you know, complex autonomous production. So if you really see how these things can build on each other, knowing that your machines are working, knowing what inventory of supplies you need to produce goods, and that's working, and then enabling your whole system to work pretty much autonomously is really the end goal for manufacturing. So that rounds out a few examples that may have whet your appetite for thinking about the Internet of Things in a really concrete way. We'd like to ask, you know, are you working on any IoT initiatives in your organization?
Give another 30 seconds here for responses, Karin.
Okay.
Getting a mix of yes and no's right now, to be expected. Awesome. All right, go ahead and close the poll. Looks like we have a mix of, you know, yes and no's, what we're seeing.
Okay, great. Well, so 2/3 of folks are working on IoT initiatives. A third, don't have active ones right now. But why don't we take a moment to take a look at, well, if you do want to implement IoT in your business, what kind of steps, what kind of an approach would you take? So first of all, we recognize that people don't buy Internet of Things. They buy a solution to a problem. What they're looking for is, hey, I've got a problem and I want to get this problem solved and make it better for me. And as the famous thinker Albert Einstein said, if I had only 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. So the first step, I think, for all businesses, all organizations really, is to understand the business strategy problem you want to solve. Is it a revenue or customer problem? Is it the top line, or is it a cost and operations problem, the bottom line? And then with that kind of identification of your business strategy, is it a growth or is it a cost problem? Then you can identify what are the business processes that could be impacted with more real-time data and a digitized workflow. So how can you leverage our digital world to fix the kind of problem that you have identified with your business strategy? So the second step, understanding the technology possibilities, what IoT sensors exist to access the data. If you're looking at perhaps that IoT is the right type of solution, is the network in place to get the data to analytics for use in automation or artificial intelligence, machine learning, or robotic process automation? And thirdly, do you have the people, technology, and process to deliver that technology solution? And thirdly, once you've identified, the problem, the technology possibilities, developing solutions that users will adopt is really important, so it doesn't have to be a push effort to actually get your solution to be used. So that we recommend that people use design thinking to understand the personas and journeys involved in a solution and the job to be done, and rapidly prototyping and learning with Agile, so that you are learning as you develop your solution in a way that you'll having something useful to users at the end. And the combination of all three of these things, go ahead, click the last, there is really the value sweet spot. So we have a combination of business strategy, technology possibilities, and matching to what users will adopt. So our next steps here, we like to tee up, why is design thinking important for IoT? And we have an upcoming webinar on July 22nd. So please join us July 22nd for Optimity's webinar, Design Thinking, for more on the design thinking approach. So we'll be sending out a thank you for this webinar with some information for registering for that. And at this point, I think we're ready to say thank you and invite questions.
So again, feel free to use chat or Q&A buttons to just raise your hand on any questions you might have.
Hey, Scott, we had one come in through the Q&A functionality. How do I ID a good opportunity for my business in IoT?
That is definitely, no, it's a great question and commonly asked, and probably, again, worthy of its own webinar in and of itself. Karin touched on a lot of different examples depending on industry, but she sunk it out pretty well in the slide around implementing IoT in your business, where the first step is understand your entire business strategy, which is composed of basically what customers do you serve with what products, and then how do you most efficiently get those products to those customers quicker, faster, cheaper, or quicker, better, cheaper. And that breaks down to a number of business processes and workflows when you get to the core. So it's really the nuts and bolts of figuring out with the people that know the most valuable things that benefit the enterprise as a whole, and then where those manifest themselves in the workflows that have the kind of decisions in those workflows, typically complex ones, sometimes simple ones, but ones that add value, workflows that add value to the organization, and that have decisions in them right now that perhaps are being made manually, that could be helped or boosted significantly with more data that IoT could funnel through to it. So that's one way to look at it, is where am I making those decisions where I could use more and better data from the outside. What other questions do people have?
We had one more come in surrounding adoption and asking how they can ensure adoption of a IoT initiative.
Karin, you want to take that?
Sure, and I think we also have Doris Lynn on the line too, who is our partner for design thinking. We recommend that that folks use the design thinking approach to develop solutions that are intuitive for users. And by going through the design thinking approach, we truly get a feeling for what users, how users think, how they feel, and then what type of solution would they gravitate to kind of automatically without having to read a big manual and have something actually forced on them. So that's the reason to use a very user-centric process for identifying solutions that people will use.
And there's a whole process in our design thinking around journey mapping, developing personas, working through empathy workshops around those personas to get to exactly what Karin is saying. And that's who uses what, how could they use it better, and don't create something that nobody will use. On the flip side, gear your IoT work to things that your users are saying are problems and that they will use.
And
there's
Doris,
a whole methodology behind that.
Yeah, Doris,
Go ahead,
do you have anything to add to that answer?
Hey, hi everybody. No, I think both of you described it pretty well, and I think design thinking is one of the methodology that is helpful, for transformation and innovation, because by nature innovation is creating something new that didn't exist before, right? So only looking at the past for examples is not going to be enough. So design thinking in general, through its empathy and discovery, defining problems, and kind of going through the process to uncover needs and new ways to solve problems is just a very effective method to kind of help you walk through that process and come up with new ideas, and the iterative nature of that allow you to be very agile. You can test out new ideas through prototyping and learn from that quickly. So you can quickly iterate on what the potential solution is before you actually spend the time, energy, and expenses to build a product in order just to find out whether or not it works in the market. So all that are probably methods that it's helpful and effective in coming up with new and innovative ideas.
Thanks, Doris. Ryan, any other questions surface?
We had one last one come in asking, what kind of technology considerations do I need to make when looking to enable an IoT solution?
It's definitely a technology question. It's definitely a resource question around the technology. But and again, a webinar in and of itself. But the quick flyover is a pitcher and a catcher. So the IoT sensors that most cleave to, again, the data and can collect the data that you're trying to use to fuel those business processes we discussed that have decision points in them. So how do you find the sensors that best surface that data quickly, effectively, and ideally consistently. The interesting thing about the IoT sensor ecosystem is there are many companies that manufacture these types of devices. We mentioned SmartThings from Samsung before, but just a plethora of those. Even in the consumer world, I worked with an IoT provider that had a sensor connected to bar stools in a restaurant that enabled the proprietors to know exactly how people configured their seating, how they moved, what the movement of people consisted of. So that is a very unique sensor. All this says, after you find the sensors, you need a way to harmonize and standardize that data. So there are software platforms out there that do what we call data virtualization, which is the next layer, so to speak, after you're able to collect the IoT data. And that's to make it so that you've got standardized nomenclature and a semantic layer, so to speak, across all of these different disparate sources of data. And then, as we mentioned, there are the algorithms, whether they're machine learning algorithms or just standard analytics that enable you to take that harmonized data from the data standardization semantic layers and convert it into dashboards or pop-up windows or whatever it is that the user needs to look at and use to take some action. So typically, and that's a drastic oversimplification, but those three layers of technology, from the sensor to the data standardization to the user algorithms and visualization.
Awesome. Well, that's it on the questions. No more new ones have come in.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending and for surfacing the very good questions. And please feel free to contact either Karin or I if you have questions after this or applications you'd like to explore. And again, we'll be following up with where you can access the recording of this webinar on a link, as well as a copy of that webinar. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.